I never imagined I'd find myself wading knee-deep in my own pasture, watching the water creep up my fence posts while Linda from the HOA sipped Pinot Grigio on her porch like she was overseeing some grand catastrophe. The storm hadn't even arrived, yet this was just the warm pan. There she was, smirking as my land turned into a bog, completely oblivious that the water she'd rerouted was about to transform her shiny new basement into a swimming pool. But let me rewind a bit. I've been on this modest plot for nearly 2 decades, right where the town fades into the wild. Life here is simple: a small garden, a handful of chickens, an old barn that's seen better days, and, most crucially, a drainage ditch I carved out myself when I first moved in. It's not much to look at, certainly not up to HOA standards, but to me, and frankly to anyone within a quarter mile, it's the unsung hero that keeps our little corner from drowning every time the rains come. Even the cranky old-timers who griped about my wild hedges would tip their caps in thanks when the ditch saved their yards after a spring deluge. Then came Linda. She rolled in about 3 years back, fresh from unloading some overpriced city loft, and immediately crowned herself ruler of the HOA. No one asked her tosh, just showed up with binders, slideshows, and a mission to tame us rural folks. At first, it was almost funny, ordering barn repaints, outlawing yard ornaments, setting grass height rules like we were in some cookie-cutter suburb instead of out here on the edge. But when she zeroed in on my ditch, the humor dried up fast. It started with a snarky note stuck to my gate with a daisy magnet. "Your ditch is an eyesore and violates HOA aesthetic standards. Please update it to align with community guidelines." I nearly spat out my coffee. The ditch, the thing keeping our homes above water, an eyesore? I tossed the note and figured she'd drop it. I underestimated her. A week later, I got back from town to find 2 sketchy landscapers, more ink than equipment, filling in my ditch. They were piling dirt, tossing rocks, and stacking up artsy boulders like it was a trendy garden display. Linda stood nearby, arms folded, beaming with pride. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded, slogging through the muck. "Fixing an ugliness," she said, like I should thank her. "That ugliness is why your roses haven't floated away every spring," I shot back. She brushed me off. "The HOA voted. The ditch is gone." There'd been no vote, no meeting, but Linda's words somehow carried weight around here. I tried reasoning with her, explaining how the runoff from the hills flowed through that ditch, how without it, water would flood yards and basements. She didn't care. She wanted pretty, and Linda always got her way, or so she thought. That night, I walked my land with a flashlight, checking the runoff spots, dreading what was coming. Sure enough, the next morning brought a light rain, not even a real storm, just a steady drizzle, and the water started pooling fast. My pasture turned soggy, creeping toward the chicken coop, and puddles sprouted all down the road. Neighbors waited out in boots, baffled at their swampy yards, while Linda stood on her dry porch, sipping wine and watching like it was a show. I marched over that afternoon, mud caking my boots. "Linda, you've got to unblock the ditch before this gets worse." She took a sip and smirked. "It's just rain. Handle it." No sorry, no hint of guilt, just pure arrogance. I stormed back home, not just mad about my wet land, but because I knew something she didn't. In 3 days, a monster spring storm was barreling our way. I'd seen the radar, heard the old-timers who read the sky better than any app. This wasn't just rain, it was the kind of storm folks remembered for years. And thanks to Linda's landscaping, all that water had nowhere to go. But here's where it gets good. Linda didn't know, and this is what kept me grinning through the anger that I wasn't about to let my place sink because of her. If she wanted to block my ditch, fine. I'd just make sure the water found a new path, one much closer to her fancy basement. And when I say it'd be epic, I mean it. Nature doesn't mess around when it's time to settle scores, and Linda was in for a wake-up call. After that drizzle already caused havoc, I knew the big storm would do more than soak lawns, it'd flood homes and cost thousands. All because Linda thought a functional ditch was tacky. I paced my porch that night, the faint drip of leftover rain in the background, realizing this wasn't just frustration, Anna Maria, it was determination. I wasn't letting Linda drown me or the neighborhood over her obsession with curb appeal. The next morning, I gave reason one last shot. I knocked on her door, keeping my cool, and laid it out. The forecast, the runoff history, the ditch's purpose, the storm's threat. I even offered to spruce it up if she'd just let me clear it. Linda flashed that fake sweet smile she used when she thought she'd won. If you put as much effort into your property as you do fretting over fake problems, you'd be HOA material, she said, then shut the door in my face. I stood there stunned. It wasn't just that she ignored me, she relished it. She wanted me to lose, maybe to force me out. Whatever her game, she wasn't budging. I walked back, staring at the clogged ditch, water trickling over the soaked ground. Then I remembered something old man Henry used to say. Water's like a mule, guide it, or it'll pick its own way. That's when the idea hit. About 50 yards behind Linda's place, buried under overgrown weeds, was an old stormwater trail from back when this was all farmland. It used to handle overflow when the ditch maxed out, sloping right down toward what was once a root cellar, now Linda's prized wine cellar basement. The irony was delicious. That night, I called my buddy Tom, one of the few neighbors not scared of Linda's rain. When I told him the plan, he laughed so hard he nearly fell over, but he was in. With 2 days until the storm, we worked under darkness, digging just enough to revive the old path, nothing obvious, just a nudge to let nature take over. By dawn, we'd carved a subtle trench. Tom clapped my shoulder. That's one hell of a welcome gift. I smirked. We weren't breaking anything, just giving water an option, and water loves an easy route. The next day, Linda strutted around, calling an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't in TED too. Word got back quick. She declared all ugly ditches needed her approval and could be axed at her whim. Folks grumbled but complied, scared of her fines. What really got me was her plan for a big HOA party in her basement the night the storm would hit. You can't make this stuff up. While she prepped string lights and folding tables, I fortified my place, sandbags around the coop, barn, and field, gravel on the drive, branches cleared. By dusk I was set. Linda? She was busy with caterers hauling wine crates, clueless about what was coming. That night, the storm rolled in slow, then roared to life. Thunder rumbled, wind whipped, and rain fell in sheets. From my dry porch, I watched the blocked ditch overflow, water racing down the path Tom and I had opened. It streamed straight for Linda's backyard. Her basement lights flickered once, twice, then died. A shriek cut through the storm. Linda's party had met its new guest. I couldn't help but laugh. The next hour was chaos. Soaked guests stumbled out, slipping in her flooded yard, cars stuck in the street. Linda flailed on her porch, yelling orders no one heeded. When she spotted me watching, she pointed, screaming something lost to the wind. I raised my coffee in a toast, not smug, just content. Come morning, my place was fine, sandbags held, ditch reroute worked. Linda's? A wreck. Her basement was a lake, wine racks trashed, rugs ruined, wiring fried. She called an HOA meeting in the mess, accusing me of sabotage. I played a recording of her bragging about ditching the ditch, not caring if we all flooded. Silence fell. No one defended her. Heads turned my way, not with blame, but thanks. Linda tried one last jab, marching to my gate with a soggy clipboard, claiming I'd rigged the water. I didn't do a thing, I said, smiling. Water just goes where it's easiest. You blocked the good path, it found another. She stormed off, defeated. The neighborhood shifted after that. Folks rebelled, held a real meeting, and voted Linda out unanimously. She put her house up for sale, but the soggy basement scared buyers off. One night, she vanished, leaving the place empty. We rebuilt the ditch wider, stronger, named it Linda's Channel. The town felt alive again, free. From my porch, watching the sunset over a quiet ditch, I sipped my coffee. Water always finds its way, just like people. And Linda? She'd learned that the hard way.